You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the Interactive Interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com.
Hello?
Hey, this is James Walsh. Is this Tom Brandi?
James, how you doing, buddy?
It's a pleasure to talk to you. How you doing?
You too. How's everything going?
Going good. Is now going to work for you?
Perfect.
All right.
I'm in the basement. I never have a problem down here, but if for some reason like you think I'm cutting out, just let me know. But I never had a problem before.
Yep. I'm old school, by the way. I've been doing this since like before everybody and their brother started doing what they call podcasts. So that's why I still do audio. I don't need you on a camera or anything like that. So
and it's funny. I try and stay away from the podcasts.
Yeah.
Because I get hit up like once or twice. Probably about like three, on the average, probably like 3 times a month.
Yep. Yeah.
And, I did a couple for guys that I was friendly with, and they're just too time consuming. And you know what, to be honest with you, I'm one of the guys, I don't really like to talk about myself.
Ah, okay.
It's kind of like, it's boring to me.
Well,
it's like they can come up with a million questions, but the answers are always going to be the same to me.
There you go. Well, I mean, I think I might have been one of those guys who sent you some of those messages over the years, but it's cool. I've been rejected before, but I'm glad we'll get to do this now. And like I said, I'll try to do about 20 minutes or so if that's cool. And if we go a little over, and if you find that we're going too long, just say, hey, can we cut this?
No, that's fine. That's more than fine. Than fine.
Yep. All right. You ready to get started?
Sure.
Yeah, so my buddy is Todd Myers. He's one of the referees that's going to be helping to put together this Mid-Atlantic Territory Wrestling event. So he kind of asked me if I could help promote it. So I put out a presser, and I said, "Ooh, well, look, Tom Brandi's on the show. Can I can I snag an interview?" And he went to the promoter, and there you go. So
yeah, well, no, like I said, this is the type of stuff. There's a purpose for it.
Right.
It's the ones when people reach out and want to talk to you for 3 hours.
Yep.
I've been wrestling for 37 years.
Right.
It's like, look, here and there, but not as much as you get. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you could see it from my side too. Like, there's a guy by the name of Honky Tonk Man, which I know you know well.
Mm-hmm. Actually, he lives near me. I'm in Arizona, so he lives near me.
Oh yeah, because you have a Jersey phone number. Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in northern New Jersey, just outside of Giant Stadium, and then I moved out here.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
And Honky's smart. Like, he's done a lot for me. I've followed in his footsteps a lot of ways. He tells me, he goes, you know what, Tom, you know what I do? Especially since he got in the Hall of Fame. He goes, I give him my PayPal address.
Yep.
If they want to PayPal me some money, then I'll talk to them. I said, you know what? You have all the right to. You have all the right to. Because these guys could turn around, they could use it for podcasts, they could use it for shoot video interviews, they could use it any way they want.
Yep.
So you know what? If you make $100 off it, why not? You deserve it.
Absolutely.
You deserve it.
Yeah, and that's what the pandemic did too. Because I've been doing this since like 2002, and when the pandemic hit and people started doing the cameos and stuff, well, a lot of the wrestlers,
all the virtuals.
Yeah, the wrestlers kind of thought, well, hey, if I can get paid to, say happy birthday to someone, why can't I get paid to do an interview? And that kind of limited my access to people, that's for sure, because I've never paid for one before. So there you go.
Well, the funny part is, like with the virtuals, I saw them starting to go wild during COVID, and I kind of like kept my distance. And it was funny because like I thought that would have been over by the time, the shows kicked back in again, all the indie shows, and guys were out and about again.
Yep.
And what's funny was I was wrong. I mean, these guys they're doing more, or just as many now, with or without, COVID or the guys doing the indies or whatever. And they're out there, they're busy. And I finally gave in. I've done 4 now, and it just amazes me the amount of money that they bring in. Amazes me the amount of money, because you're selling to people all over the country.
Absolutely.
All over the world, even.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I'm ready to get started. If you are, there's a couple questions about the event coming up. There's some career highlight stuff. I promise I won't ask you about, every single match you ever had, but is that cool? We'll try to go about 20 minutes.
No, believe me, this is no problem whatsoever.
All right, let's get started here in 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio. Joining me on the Newsmaker line for the first time ever is a gentleman who will be performing for Mid-Atlantic Territory Wrestling, Scars and Stripes, and it's so appropriate to have on the man who will be donning the Patriot mask. He is Tom Brandi, the Patriot. Are you with me, sir?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you on, and I like I said, there's a purpose to this. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Mid-Atlantic Territory Wrestling, I know they have big aspirations. What's your thoughts on these guys starting this promotion and hoping to do something a little bit more in the territory aspect of wrestling?
No, it's a great promotion. Mutual friends that were, put it together. I just did my first show. This will be my second, and I have two more on the schedule before the end of summer. So I was very impressed. The promoter, Brandon, he reached out to me, and we've been talking for months. It's one of those guys where you feel like you've known him for years, and indirectly like we have, which has never really met each other or really worked in the ring or whatever, all through mutual friends. And, he preached to me on how he wanted to be different than all the other independents. And I've been doing this 37 years total between the big leagues and the indie leagues. And, it's a breath of fresh air because he stood by his word. He wanted to, he wouldn't be doing it if he couldn't be do it different. And he really wanted to bring back that feel of 1992 WCW, the colors, the lighting, the mindset, the style of wrestling. And, what I've learned is what's old is new, and old school never goes out of school. And that's there's no doubt. Plus, he mixes in all the new stuff too. So, it's a little bit of everything.
That's right. Yeah, but it looks good. My friend Todd Myers is one of the referees there who's getting heavily involved in promoting it. And he keeps telling me, dude, you're going to like it. You're going to like what we do. So here's hoping with the TV taping that's going to be happening the week after Scars and Stripes that something comes of it. You guys, either online or on terrestrial TV or somewhere or another, people can see this.
There's no doubt. Yeah, they're going to do it their first TV taping. He's got an A1 ring, perfect ring for television. And again, you live and you learn. You do your taping, you might see how the lighting looks. You're always going to learn from it. You're always going to say, well, I'm going to do this one different next time. I'll do this different next time. And the talent is very solid. I met a few guys for the first time. I haven't been in Virginia too much in the last, the COVID years. And then, here and there before that, Virginia was a real fun state a long time. And then it kind of, like everything else, it quieted down. Certain promoters kind of dropped off, and he's brought life back to the state.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned where I'm calling you from. My phone number is a New Jersey number, and it just brought back a memory. The first time I ever saw you wrestle was back in a show that aired on local TV in northern New Jersey, and that was Mario Savoldi's IWCCW Wrestling. And man, I go back a long ways. I look back at that stuff with such fondness, and I've had the opportunity to interview your former tag partner, Tommy Dreamer, and every time I talk to him, I ask him a question about Savoldi, which kind of pops him a little bit. What was your memory of working IWCCW, and do you get why maybe somebody my age, I'm 41, might look at that with such, fondness?
Well, it was the alternative. So everybody, you were probably like myself, you love wrestling, you couldn't get enough of it. Mm-hmm. It gave you another company that, with all the glitz and glamour you expected from WWF, NWA, and all the biggest companies, ICW, IWWCCW, which I call ICW,
right,
is like, it was a nice alternative. It was a free agent type of promotion where, Mario Savoldi would always grab people as soon as they got let go. He always wanted at least one match in his ring, and he would package it and repackage it for years and years and years, and that's what Mario would do. So he was smart about it. He has a very deep library. And for us, we were just coming up in the business, so he would give us 2 and 3 days worth of wrestling that we couldn't get anywhere else. He would book, we would always go up to Maine, mm-hmm. and it was like his territory. because Vince wasn't running up there at the time, and Mario used to promote it for Vince. Mm-hmm. So he knew the towns, he knew the buildings and whatnot. So Mario, got us to go in and get, we got a lot of experience there we couldn't get anywhere else. Because, back then there wasn't any wrestling schools. I was trained by a wrestler by the name of King Kalua, who was also a mainstay in IWCCW.
Yep.
So he was a local guy that I found, that I sought out, and, I let him know that how much I wanted to be a wrestler. And, we trained in the backyard on dirt and grass on mattresses because there were no schools. The only school that was remotely close was the Monster Factory in Jersey, and that wasn't close at all. That wasn't something that you would just jump in a car and drive over and train at. It just wasn't something you did back then.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was all on-the-job training. And then when I would start getting matches, you're training in the ring. Like, that's how you're training. You're training in the ring, and you're making your mistakes, and it's all on-the-job training. And, now I tell people, the kids that go to wrestling school now, they're as that good in 3 months where I was in probably 2 years, because they do nothing but repetition over and over and over and over. And then, we wanted to wrestle more, but we're very limited on what we had access to.
Absolutely. And, of course, many others who don't know you as Tom Brandi, they know you by a couple other names. Of course, I mentioned the Patriot earlier, but also Johnny Gunn. And I was asked specifically to mention WCW with you and your experiences there. You said that this company, MATW, it's to look a little bit like 1992 WCW, which you would know a lot about because you were there then. What was your take on World Championship Wrestling at that time? And, you were there for kind of some volatile regime changes already.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was my first big break. So my first break was in Puerto Rico. There was a company that was going opposition to Carlos Colon. Mm-hmm. So I went there in February of '92, and I was there until I was there until September of '92 when I was pushing WCW, and they gave me a job. And I started, and then, came in Halloween Havoc, '92 in Philadelphia and everything else. That was my first pay-per-view. And, I loved my time there because, you're there with the best of the best. You're on TV, you're doing big house shows, you're there with great talent, you're there with great guys and everything else. And, definitely what you mentioned about the volatile management changes, because, I was hired by Bill Watts.
Bill Watts, right, yeah.
Yeah, Magnum TA. Was the one that called me on the phone, and then Bill Watts was there. Then he was gone, so he was there probably, I forget, maybe like 4 or 5 months. We were there together, and then when he left, Dusty took over. Ole left. It was pretty much Dusty and Magnum, but it was pretty much all Dusty. Yeah, he had the pencil at the time. So I mean, it was mainly, his decisions and his calls on everything.
All right.
But it was great. Like I said, we met a lot of great wrestlers, made friends for a lifetime, and great to be in all those southern towns and really all over the country.
Very cool.
It was great.
Absolutely. One of the cool things I get to do is I get to interview a few people off the beaten path, and one of the guys I interviewed a few years ago was Billy Silverman, who was a referee for WCW and also for the AWF, and surprisingly long amount of time during our interview was spent talking about the AWF. And I actually kind of have a little story there. I have a picture of myself holding the AWF championship belt when I was 14 years old. It was kind of cool. What did you think of that stunt?
Tito still has that belt to this day. I just saw Tito on Friday night, and he was telling me, I know he has the belt. He brought it up in conversation how people have tried to buy that from him at conventions and stuff. Mm-hmm. But AWF actually, even though it wasn't around long, it probably, in a lot of ways, it was my favorite promotion.
Really?
Because they really, really, really had plans for me over and above what I got anywhere else. It's just they didn't have the longevity, and they just, they started to leak oil. And, the guy was Paul Alperstein putting is all the money coming out of his pocket. And, you can't, unless you're going to get picked up by a major network. He was only able to get on some real small, the cable channels and the small time stuff. But in a lot of ways, it was my favorite promotion I worked for.
And there you got to team with the guy who was kind of like a local hero in my area. I know I know what Jimmy worked out in. I know what music he put on because nobody was going to tell him he couldn't put what he wanted on in the gym. And that's Jimmy Powers. Did you enjoy your time teaming with Jimmy Powers?
Oh, yeah. No, I love Jimmy. Jimmy from day one, whether we were there or not. But Jimmy was one that just couldn't like adjust to the indies. Like it just seemed like it was too much work for Jimmy, and we all tried to help him. You know, he was just used to doing his opening match for WWF, putting over whoever, going over, whether it's him and the Young Stallions or whatever. Winning and losing didn't matter. He just had too much of a hard time adjusting after it was over. And, you know, he got a little bit of run in WCW, but just Jimmy, and we all tried to help him. We all would like give his phone number out and tell him who to call and get booked on these shows. And Jimmy just could never make it work on the indies. And even though like he was a Jersey guy, could have been a drive-in, he was a name wrestler, and he really could have did well, but he just couldn't. I don't know if he didn't want to do the work or he just felt like it was too much work. But I always loved Jimmy.
Absolutely. And of course, I'm going through all your gimmicks here. And another one that you had, of course, probably the biggest one, definitely, was Salvatore Sincere in the WWE. In preparation for this, I kind of was listening to other people's opinions, Bruce Pritchard being one of them, of the Sal Sincere character. He kind of talked about that being Vince Russo writing the vignettes and filming it himself and all that kind of good stuff. What was your thoughts on the persona of Salvatore Sincere?
Well, there's a story that I tell, and I'll make it quick. The day before we were going up to Stanford, a friend of mine called me, and he was reading Dave Meltzer's kayfabe sheet. And he said, hey, your Meltzer's talking about you guys. Did you know you're being hired, 5 of you guys tomorrow? And I said, no. I said, what's it? Read it to me. He goes, Tom Brandi, Alex Porto, Bill Irwin, Tony Anthony, and Tracy Smothers have all been hired to above jobber status. And like, it's like being kicked in the balls. Like I waited my whole life for this opportunity, and all I wanted was an opportunity. And I was so excited that the call finally came. I'm like, why am I being labeled? I haven't even wrestled there yet. So what they were doing was they needed some veteran guys that they could put in with anybody because they were starting up a second round of house shows. They needed bodies. They needed veteran guys. So we all went up the next day. We all got hired. We all got, our deal. And Sal Sincere was the only one they put any effort into. Like everybody else had a real sorry-ass outfit.
That's right.
Like everything's a rib there with that company half the time because like Freddie Joe Floyd was the Briscoe brothers' middle names. The one's Freddie Joe and the other one's Floyd. That's how they gave it. Could have just called him Tracy Smothers. I mean, he was a legendary wrestler with everybody's respect.
Absolutely.
They could have just called him Tracy Smothers. Alex Porto, they give him a sorry-ass singlet.
The pug.
Tony Anthony, they give him a plunger because he used to be a plumber. Like, because they always ask you, what did you do in life?
Yeah.
And it's either how you talk or how you conduct yourself. They saw me as like a mobster, like an Italian gangster, and I loved it because I love the outfit, I love the colors, and everything that you saw on TV, I pretty much did myself unless they told me not to do it, because they didn't give us any leeway, they didn't give us any direction. We were just there, and before you knew it, like I was there about a month. All of a sudden, I'm on the undefeated going into the main event on Raw against the Undertaker.
Yeah,
and I'm like, you know what? For me to be even in this spot, they got to think a lot of me because they're not going to just put anybody in a live. You can't. If you mess up, there's no saving you when it's live. And I said, you know what? They must have thought a lot of me to put me in a live match against Undertaker, and it was through 2 live segments, which went about 15 minutes on Raw, which is an eternity.
Right.
And
right.
Long story short, I was the only one out of the 5 to get a second real contract out of the deal. So I carved out my niche. Then the biggest mistake was when they turned me babyface. It was downhill from there. Yeah. And after a while, as myself, I just put in my notice. I said, that was it. I'm not here to do jobs as myself. As a heel, as Sal Sincere, I'd still be there if I could. I said, but as Tom Brandi, who's my God-given name, I'm not here to do jobs on a weekly television. and it was time to go. After that time, it was time to go.
It's kind of funny you said as a veteran at that point, and you were like 32 years old, and half the guys that we look at now, that we kind of consider younger guys are older than that we see on TV now. I mean, what is your thoughts on being a veteran at such a young age?
Well, it's just from being around. I mean, yeah, the veteran part, being around, but it's also like, it's not the kind of veteran that just wrestles, say, well, I've been wrestling 15 years, but yeah, you wrestle 5 times a year.
Right.
It's nothing like that. Like I mentioned, like Puerto Rico was my first break, no, I take it back. Memphis was my first break. That was in '88. So I went down there, wrestled 6 days a week for Jerry Lawler. And that's where I finally felt good about my in-ring skills, because now with all those repetitions, I finally got, which I thought was pretty good. Then after that was, I had mentioned, was Puerto Rico, then WCW. After WCW was that AWF you mentioned, All Japan, and then Vince was 96 was WWF.
That's right.
So, but the veteran part, at least I had a lot of matches to call myself a veteran. A lot of guys didn't.
There you go. And you were kind of like the trusted guy they put in the ring with The Rock to kind of help him along as he first came in. Did you think that he would become the biggest box office attraction in the ring and at the movie theaters that he became?
No, the movie theaters were never thought of. Nobody cared at the time. I mean, it was all about, he was a can't miss as a wrestler because of his mom, his dad, and his granddad.
Right.
He was a can't miss. And this is way before when I was working with him. I mean, we wrestled at least 40 times.
Yeah.
And when I wrestled him, nobody, he was as down to earth as could be. Nobody was talking about, there was no people's the eyebrow and all that nonsense that had happened after when they turned him heel. He was going to develop no matter what. I mean, they could have tried to hold him down. You could never hold him down. He had everything going for him. Everything. You'll never get another guy like him ever again.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. So here's the hard question. And I hope that I phrased this well. You mentioned Honky Tonk Man before we started recording, and there's kind of a strange story that goes along with this, but you are the Patriot. That's who you are now. That's who you're going to be wrestling as at Scars and Stripes for MATW. How did you become the Patriot? So
the story that's never changed goes all the way back to 1998. Okay. So we were doing these army bases all over the country for a guy named Tom Shade, and he had the rights. Now, you might remember, so one of the biggest television commercials of all time was 1-800-COLLECT.
That's right.
1-800-COLLECT was a humongous thing back in the mid to late 90s.
That's right.
So they were the sponsor. They're the one that paid all the bills at all these army bases across the country. So we're wrestling in front of 2,000 people. Now I'm free agent, so like I was doing my Tom Brandi persona as a heel on these shows, wrestling with against Brian Lee. So they had Valentine, Valentine, Honky, Snake. They had Jake Roberts. They had Sultan, but it wasn't. It was Umaga.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was not Rikishi. Rikishi gave the outfit to his brother because it was before WWE, and he needed experience. Well, he just needed as many matches as he could get. So they put him in the Sultan outfit, and he wrestled on those shows.
Wow.
So they said, we need a red, white, and blue character. They reached out to Del Wilkes. Del Wilkes said, I'm completely retired. I have all kind of ailments. I have all kind of torn ligaments and tendons. He goes, I'll never wrestle another match. He says, use the gimmick, use the character. You have you do whatever you want to do. He goes, it was fun when it lasted. He goes, but I'll never be able to wrestle again, whether I want to or not. So they looked around the indie scene, and there really wasn't anybody jumping out at them. And the Honky and Snake were the bookers. And Honky said, just like it was yesterday, he said, you know what, just let Brandi work twice. He said he's got the body for it. He goes, just go get a mask and a pair of trunks. It's not something we're going to put on TV. It's not something we're going to use anywhere else besides these army base shows where there's 2,000 soldiers. We need a good guy, the ultimate good guy, to go against the ultimate bad guy. And the rest is history. So, like, nothing ever came of it for years and years and years. And actually, I was friendly with Del. We were in Japan together.
Right, all
and
Japan,
I was friendly with him in WWE as well. We were friendly there as well. Never a problem with him. And then the podcast stuff kicked in, and people started stir the drink and start shit. And you know what? Del Wilkes never, ever, ever one time reached out to me, ever. He might have talked shit on podcasts. Never one time did he ever reach out and say, hey, listen, you know. But see, what came down to it was Honky Tonk Man, somebody put this in his head because he was out to get Vince McMahon.
Mm-hmm.
His lawyer said, go out, get as many copyrights as you can of all the wrestlers that Vince has let go of the rights.
Mm-hmm.
For $250 a year, you can own the rights to all these characters. So when Vince puts out these DVDs, we could send a cease and desist letter so he writes you a check. It was brilliant.
Yes,
it was
sir.
brilliant. Nobody ever thought to do this. So at one time, Honky had about 10 different guys' characters.
Wow.
If he wanted to tell Brutus Beefcake you can't wrestle as Brutus Beefcake, he had the rights to.
Wow.
If he wanted to tell he had the Nasty Boys, he had 10 guys at one time. And it never happened. Like him and Vince made up and he started put him on, Hall of Fame and all that stuff. So he never forced his hand. At the same time, he had the rights to all these characters. And he said to me, he goes, we put you in Patriot and you'll be the only one that does the Patriot. If Del Wilkes wants to do it, he can't even do it. That's him talking. Obviously, if Del wanted to do it, obviously he wasn't going to stop him. But Del was done. Del didn't even do appearances. 20 years went by. I mean, I've been doing this since 98.
Right.
20-some years went by. You never heard a word out of Del Wilkes. And all of a sudden, some of the podcasts started stirring shit and just made things a little bit, just, again, stirring shit. It could have been me. It could have been the next guy. Yeah. Nobody had rights or nobody had, we're going to tell somebody else not to do it. Then you start seeing them pop up on some indies here and there, the Patriot, and the guy looked like he weighed about 300 pounds. It's right. Like, listen, I'd never do the character if I couldn't respect it and look the part. I would never have done it. They never would have put me in it if I didn't look like a figure that you can get behind and cheer.
There you go. Yeah,
and that's the long and short of it. There's no story that's different. That's been the same story from 1998 to now. The story's never changed.
So a little secret for you. I've actually, I was one of the guys who interviewed Del Wilkes back in 2017. And he did tell that story that, he didn't appreciate it and signing autographs of his picture and stuff like that. But he was the sweetest guy. And I wish that you guys had talked before he passed, because I think you guys, based on what you just said, could have put that to bed and stopped any kind of ill will that might have existed.
Well, you know what it was? Like I mentioned before, the ill will never had to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very easily, you can find me very easily. You can find me very easily. I'm easily approachable. It could have been a text message. It could have been an email. It could have been a phone call. It never bothered him until people started stirring the shit. And apparently it didn't bother him too much because he still, to this day, God rest his soul, my phone never rang once. So I said, listen, I never tried to do the character on TV. I never called Vince, never called AEW, TNA, whomever, Japan. The thing was a little East Coast indie promotion, and that's all it ever went. After the Army base shows were over a year later, when the contract ran out, we never went back. It always stayed on little East Coast indie shows with 100 and 200 people. And my response was always the same. If Del Wilkes wants to drive up here from South Carolina and wrestle in front of 100 people, he's more than welcome. That story's never changed.
I love it.
Never, ever changed.
Well, I appreciate that story. That's awesome. And I'm glad to finally kind of know the answer myself, because I've always kind of wondered it. And then when he mentioned it, it kind of like, well, what?
And let me interrupt you real quick. His biggest problem was me signing his picture, and I'll tell you how quick that ended. The promotion printed the pictures up first. Mm-hmm. Okay, they had to get pictures for the soldiers, and they gave them out. We signed 1 million pictures. Until I could get my own shots, Yes, I signed his picture at first. Once I was able to get my picture on the picture, that was it. I didn't need his picture. I had to get my own done. And that was the end of it. So it wasn't something that was done years and years and years later. It was only at the very beginning when the first couple Army base shows took place. But like I said, you never heard a peep out of him I've been doing this 25 years. You never heard a peep out of him for the first 20. He never said a word. He was under a rock. He wasn't doing conventions. He wasn't doing any interviews or podcasts.
Right.
And until he did them, that's when it came out.
Yeah, he ran a car dealership for a while. I know he was kind of out of the focus of the
completely out of it. No, yeah. I mean, like I said, he was 1,000% out of it.
Right.
He was a guy that his whole career was only 10 years. People don't understand that. His whole career as the Trooper and the Patriot.
Right.
If you look at Wikipedia, his whole career lasted 10 years.
Yeah. Started in.
I've been doing the Patriot for 20. I've been in the business 37.
Right.
And 25 as the Patriot. That's crazy if you think about it.
That is absolutely insane. Absolutely. You're kind of like the replacement singer. You know? Yeah.
You know what it is?
Right.
It's exactly the truth, because it's one of those things where it's a good little character for the little kids. I give out the little flag to the little 8-year-old kids. They don't know who Del Wilkes was.
Right.
They look at a guy, and I always say, you know what? At the end of the day, if this would have happened way earlier, I just would have come up with a different name. What I represent on these indie shows, you see a guy that's red, white, and blue. I give little flags out to the little kids. You wrestle a 10-minute match, and you're go home. Because like a lot of shows, I'll still wrestle twice, and I'll be Sal Sincere, and I'll be the Patriot.
That's amazing.
And again, I'd still be wrestling with or without the Patriot. It would just be called something else. It would have the same end result.
Awesome.
You hand the kids the little flags. You wrestle the guy dressed up as the Sheik. You pin him 1, 2, 3 with a schoolboy, and everybody goes home happy.
That's awesome. So wrestling has changed a little bit. If you were around as you were in 1995, looking like Johnny Gunn or even Sal Sincere, and just that age and that size and that everything, you would probably stand out like Andre the Giant now, because you're so much bigger than what the rest of the guys kind of have become. Like it used to be a 230-pound guy was considered small in wrestling, and now it's kind of like that's average size, maybe even big. What's your thoughts on wrestling trending downwards in size and the way the action in the ring has changed as well?
I never really gave it much thought. I mean, if you think about it, when I was there, the first guy to break the barrier was 1, 2, 3 Kid,
mm-hmm.
but it was brilliant because they finally had a guy they can use as like an underdog,
mm-hmm.
and then it was Chris Candido. So once those guys finally got hired and the floodgates opened, because you had some of the greatest workers of our lifetime were just small. The Chris Benoits and the Guerreros and the Malenkos. These were phenomenal guys that I couldn't hold a candle to. But I was a foot taller, and there was a day and time that they wouldn't even be looked at. I mean, there's a lot of bitter people because they couldn't get hired because of their size.
Right.
And I'm glad that wrestling finally gave in, because they should have given in a long time before that. They didn't have to. I don't know why they waited so long to give in. These guys were phenomenal. They had to make their bones in Japan, and they had phenomenal matches. And then, WCW gave in a little bit. WWF gave in a little bit. But, again, I don't really look at it now, like size-wise, because I don't really know many guys anymore. But, again, everybody that's on there can go. They're all great. They all can go.
All right. And we mentioned at the beginning of the interview, and we'll kind of close out with it, Mid-Atlantic Territory Wrestling coming up here. Scars and Stripes, hard to say. Scars and Stripes coming up on July 1st, and then the TV taping on July 8th. Any final thoughts about what they're planning on doing with their promotion in the next couple months?
You know what? If anybody's listening, try and come out a little bit. Try and support it, because I know they've made a huge financial investment just to bring wrestling to the fans. We just did a show. We were down around Norfolk area. Mm-hmm. And I just drove by the Scope. The show was about 10 minutes from the Scope. And I said, how many great matches have been in that building? Like, I've been lucky to wrestle there probably like 4 or 5 times. But, like, I get all warm and fuzzy when you think about the WCW, NWA territory. You know, you think of Ric Flair. You think of Ric Flair in every one of those buildings. You think of Ricky Steamboat. You think of the generation before. You think of the generation after. And I don't get warm and fuzzy about the northern areas as I do the southern areas because it was a territory. Like, when I was there, you have your loop where you go through, like, your Florida towns, and then you go through your North Carolina, South Carolina towns. And you always think of the Ric Flairs and the 1-hour time limit matches and the Road Warriors and all those guys. And it's just, you know what? If you're a family and you have some kids, younger kids or whatever, try and support it. It's so much fun, and you don't know how much fun it is until you go out there. And, it's family entertainment. It's all G-rated wrestling, and you won't regret it. You really won't. If you could keep an eye on, because they are definitely moving all over the state. He is trying to hit a lot of the towns that WCW used to run. And I just asked the fans, if you could just kind of be a little aware of it, maybe follow it on Facebook or, Instagram, whatever, Twitter, whatever they're on, and just try and be aware. Maybe if the show's within an hour, half hour of your house, if you could support it, because they're not like any other independent that's in the area.
Yeah, that's what my buddy says. He has nothing but high praise for it. So I'm hoping you guys are able to do something and make some noise, because it looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, you know what? We appreciate you promoting it, and maybe we could touch base again in a few months and just see where it's come in that period of time.
I'd love to do that with you, man. Well, I want to thank you for taking this time. I know I went a little longer than I said I would, but...
No worries. No, I appreciate it. It's all good conversation.
Cool. Hey, before I let you go, do you mind if I ask for one last favor from you?
Sure.
Do you mind if I ask for a station ID? And you could do this any way you want. You could do the Patriot, you could do Salvatore Sincere, you could do it Tom Brandi, however you want. Just saying this is whichever name you choose, and you're listening to the Wrestling Epicenter.
You got it. This is a Salvatore Sincere. And you have to understand, whether it's Italian or American, pay attention. You're listening to the Wrestling Epicenter. Enjoy.
Oh, that was awesome, man. Thank you so much. That was really cool. And
I got to knock the rust off that once in a while.
All right, man. Thank you so much. Like I said, what I'll do is I'll type up a transcript of basically everything we talked about and send it out to all the wrestling sites to get posted. And hopefully they remember to include the part where they promote MATW and we get some attention on that.
Sounds good. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time. Have a good day.
Take care. Have a good night.
You too.
This is Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Oh, rush.
Featuring the interactive interview.
Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Oh yeah.
Formerly The Blaze.
The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze rock.
Yo, Maniacs, so what you gonna do when the Blaze of Maniacs runs wild on you?
On WrestlingEpicenter.com.
Wrestling Epicenter.
Wrestling
Epicenter. Wrestling
Epicenter.
Wrestling Epicenter.
Wrestling Epicenter. The Wrestling Epicenter. Don't get off.
And now we shamelessly name drop from our history.
The Wrestling Epicenter would like to apologize for the following.
All right, everybody. Arriba la raza. Viva la raza.
Hey, y'all.
Hello, ladies.
Hey, guys. We had a lovely conversation. First lady. Absolutely. Oh, look at me. She's so kooky. Hi.
Be there. Where else?
Interactive Wrestling Radio. Wrestling
Epicenter.
Oh, my God. what? You win! Love being interactive.
I was gonna shoot him.
I almost missed my pants.
Breaking neck. I got 2 words for you. I've heard a lot about you guys. Let's go. Excuse my language. Getting over the shot. See him now. We're into the many.
No nerves.
That was great. It's gonna be cool. What it's all about. The purest point of view. The living legend. Arrogant.
You're listening to me.
Instead of statement, I'm talking to you.
You're so lonely without you.
In the land of extreme.
Testify. Nevermore. Interactive interview. I'm not just the best. Interactive interview with a plastic
You
head.
earned the right.
Nobody. You better keep listening. Thank you very much. Controversy creates chaos. Professional
Made
wrestling.
in the USA, baby.
Memphis wrestling. The guy on fire. I'm not
We were sexy.
What a show.
The one and only.
Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Wrestling
Epicenter.
Interactive interview. We took care of the business and ballet. We are huge with this whole. You're where it's at. You gotta recognize who's the best.
Make sure to tune in each and every week.
I'll come out of your computer.
Knock down your door and turn it on for you.
Or else I'm gonna kick your stinking teeth in. And that's the bottom line.
Have a nice day.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.